that the coronavirus doesn't pass.
Black Lives Matter demonstration.
Operation Rollout.
So unfortunately, because I just feel like we're going down this road, we've been down this road before.
Hello and welcome to Your Voice. I'm Tet Kofi. Ever since President Trump called Africa a continent of S-hole countries, the subject we're discussing today has never been far from people's lips. Following that, the pressure of the pandemic with a high diasporan death toll, the horrific killing of George Floyd at the knee of an American policeman, and the resulting Black Lives Matter demonstrations across 50 countries have all highlighted the vulnerability of our people in the diaspora. Everyone wants to know how we can build strong communities which demand and get the respect they deserve in society. First came the review and removal of public monuments, which glorified slave traders. Then Black Pound Day, the brainchild of UK rapper Swiss, became the next item our communities in the UK engaged with. Throughout the journey to show that Black Lives Matter, people in the diaspora have looked to their own resources and ingenuity rather than government initiatives to find a way forward. So today, we ask our viewers, how can our black communities commit themselves to becoming strong participants in society with the power and influence to ensure that black lives truly matter? Most importantly, this is your show, your voice, your shout. So please do get in touch and have your say via the number we'll be playing on the screen right below. Here in the studio to dissect this issue, first of all, are Kevin Stewart, co-proprietor and owner of The Wolf in the Kitchen, and project manager Dean O'Kine. A real pleasure to have you join us, gentlemen. Let's dive right in. In your opinion, what is the single most important thing we need to do to develop our community? Very briefly.
For me personally, what we try to do, myself and my business partner, of Wolf in the Kitchen, we try to empower our young people. So empower them with knowledge about themselves, you know, who they are, where they're coming from, their history, you know, trying to knowledge them up. I think without that, you're fighting a losing battle.
You're talking about building the human asset. Dee, what's your key, most important thing to do for our community to develop itself?
Kevin just hit the nail on the head. The only difference is we need to deliver it in a systematic way, because what we are anomalies. If there was a burning building, and this is why Grenfell is such a great example, you would tell the vast majority of us who've been indoctrinated to go back inside. But then there are those who are anomalies who would escape. It's not for the anomalies to turn around and say that everybody can do it, because we did it as anomalies. We need to systemize it. Manhood Academy, WYLA, Origin HQ are all African rites of passage. And those African rites of passage are a systematic way of giving our young men and women the skills to enter our community and introducing those to accomplished African diasporans that they can see, touch and speak to on a regular basis.
We're more or less on the same page. You're talking about developing the human asset. Dean is talking about a system to deliver that in a systematic way. So, how important do you think self-esteem is in this whole structure of matters?
I mean, self-esteem is very important, but self-esteem is something that has to be built and nurtured. That's what I believe. I mean, coming from my background, self-esteem, it was something that was always beaten down. Mm-hmm. You know, you're beaten down by your parents, you know, with this tough love treatment. Not knocking that, but I feel like that was probably best for maybe the Caribbean and Africa, but
Sure.
It didn't work for here.
Absolutely.
But self-esteem is something that needs to be nurtured, because I feel that environment that our youngsters are living in is very, how can I say, rocky. And it cannot.
Do you think they need a more nurturing, more kind of convivial kind of love, a softer kind of love rather than that tough love?
I believe it needs to be nurtured in terms of built, grown, and helped.
You're talking, Dean, about a systematic way of delivering this. How would you systematically create a situation in which self-esteem is just by the numbers delivered to our people?
Origin HQ have been doing it for 20 years.
What is Origin HQ?
Origin HQ is a rites of passage organisation in South London.
Okay.
And then born from that is one of the brothers, Konsu, who's in Origin HQ, who started Manhood Academy.
Right.
So what they do is deliver a high cultural self-esteem, irrespective of racism and schools. And our supplementary schools did it as we came over.
Okay.
The difference is where we've been encouraged to assimilate instead of upholding, promoting and preserving our own culture, is where the erosion of our culture and our cultural self-esteem, and therefore from your cultural self-esteem comes your spiritual self-esteem.
Absolutely.
Some spirits have power.
Okay. Now, you'll be both surprised to know that I'd love to share this fact with you, that the most recent research indicates that on the most definitive study on the subject, black teenagers do not have lower self-esteem than whites, rather they have higher self-esteem. Anti-racism campaigners claim that the report suggests there is even more discrimination against blacks than previously thought. But despite this, in the face of this incredible onslaught, it seems that high self-esteem is something that actually young black children have. So moving on from...
Bear with me.
Go ahead.
First and foremost, it would be remiss of me, sir, not to question the source of your research.
Okay.
Secondly, when we talk about the esteem of young African Caribbean men, we are resilient. So we have self-esteem, but we may not have cultural self-esteem. So when I come in a room where you have previously dominated me, I may feel the need to smile and assimilate. Whereas with my own, I can be very bestial. So I always question the research.
Excellent.
And not only that, but a European perspective on then the interpretation of that research has very little to do with our young people.
Okay. Well, this is excellent. I mean, I completely understand where you're coming from on that. That research was done from North Carolina in the United States of America.
Which has nothing to do with us here.
Well, not in the United Kingdom,
correct.
But it's North Carolina is actually one of the southern states of America and has got quite a high minority ethnic population. Well, and I think what they were, just a moment, I think what they were trying to say in that piece of research is how resilient people are.
Absolutely.
They weren't talking about cultural self-esteem, which is probably, you don't need research to tell you that that's probably been heavily damaged, because it's very difficult for these kids to see positive role models for themselves. But in the discussion of what developing the black community looks like, I'd like to move on now into another thing, which is related to what you've said, our cohesiveness, the extent to which we mesh with the wider population within which we are minorities. What do you say to that, Kevin? Is that important?
I mean, it's very important, obviously, for progression and evolvement and so forth, and for us to, you know, to become cornerstones in our society. But I mean, I think there's a lot that needs to be done for that to happen.
Right.
So we've moved on from self-esteem, but there's so many elements that need to come together for us to be able to be cohesive with the wider population.
Can I ask Dave, what does it take to constructively be cohesive with the majority of population? Because mind you, it's quite possible to be cohesive with the majority of the population just gets swallowed up.
Well, that's what happens when you assimilate. But I think a proven demonstration is the Indian community, for instance, who proudly uphold, promote and preserve their culture. So if I went to South Hall, make no mistake, I am aware that I am a guest while I'm there. And this isn't any slight. This is a proud community of people who are absolutely doing what they're supposed to do. So based on them upholding, promoting and preserving their culture, they realized the cultural capital. So the most racist Englishman will go into an Indian restaurant with 10 of his mates and spend £1,000 on food and drink. And when the piano goes ping, the restaurant owners won. So when you uphold, promote and preserve your culture, it creates community cohesion, because the business owners know their role, which is to tithe and underpin the community. Those who are advocates know their role, and they play it positively, having the finances to be the best advocates, and then the community benefits from that.
We'll come to the question of finances and economics in a moment. But Kevin, the terms on which we adhere to the majority population, what's your take on that in terms of our community's development?
I mean, our community development, to me personally, we need to be recognized for who we are. And I feel that's not happening.
Okay.
That's to me is very important.
Okay.
There's a long list of who we are and where we're coming from and so forth. And I think we are not recognized for
what
who
we
we
are.
are and what we are.
Very good.
And
Can we come back to this? I'm afraid we've run out of time with this. We're going to take a short break now, but please join us again for part 2, where we'll be continuing the conversation. See you in a few minutes. Welcome back to Your Voice with me, Ted Kofi, and my guests, Kevin Stewart and Dean O'Kine. Now, Dean, during the break, we referenced again the issue of the source of that research, and you made a statement that it might lead, the conclusion of that research might lead to government action of a particular kind. What kind of government action?
Apathy. If you take a small manipulated census and come up with any conclusion of your own design, then there's no reason for you to take any particular discourse that's going to impact on you economically.
Okay.
Therefore, your job is done.
Okay. I'm going to move on from that, the fact of social cohesion into economic power. We're looking at what community development means like for the black communities, right? So we've looked at self-esteem, we've looked at social cohesion, now we're going to look at economic power. What part does economic power play in this, or is it the big part?
Obviously, it's a massive part. I mean, without economic power, then you can't really call any shots, you can't get nothing done, as far as I can see. Economic power allows companies to influence government parties, you know, to get laws passed, policies passed.
Money can create more money by shaping policy.
So therefore, economic power is a big deal, right? So yes, in terms of in the black circles, in our communities and so forth, we need to build economic power, most definitely.
Dean?
We live in a global race-based economy that we are tricked out of our position of clarity as to whether or not it exists. Black means nothing. It's a euphemism. It's a non-persona. We are Africans. However we got here, we are African diasporans. There's something in that cultural capital and understanding that sovereignty that puts us in one of those lanes alongside every other ethnicity, exclusively with our pot of gold, and knowing that. So we live in a race-based economy where there's a track that we're not taking part, and we are totally reliant on our traditional adversaries, which makes no sense. Now that means you have to contribute to your own lane, completely building your own lane, training your own runners, feeding your own runners, and clearing the path for them to be successful to bring back the gold medals for everybody else.
Right.
And everybody understands that in terms of their ethnicity in this being a race-based global economy.
So you're talking about a consciousness within our community itself of its responsibility to itself to develop its own capital.
We had it. We had it with a partner. That's cultural banking.
Right.
So when you uphold, promote and preserve your culture, you could have called it Susu. Everybody has a name for it. Partner was cultural banking. We didn't need to go to anybody else for loans, and we purchased freeholds with no mortgages. And when we stopped doing that, we fell behind in ownership, we fell behind in debt. So there is a model that works via demonstration, not by my theory, but by practical, tangible demonstration, which we abandoned for approval from our adversaries.
So that we would fit in better from within the wider society.
Yeah.
I'm going to go to some vox pops that was sent in by our viewers on this subject. We asked them, what do we mean by developing the black community? What development meant? And one said it meant economic independence by ensuring that money circulates within, not out of our community. That was Rosanwo. Another gentleman called Mansour Bello said that money is influence. And so there is a reign of thinking that economics is absolutely dead core center of what our issues should be. Kevin, I want to move on to what you would do in concrete terms. We don't have very much time left in this part. In concrete terms, what would you do in the light of our conversation now to build a stronger and develop a stronger black community?
My thing first and foremost would not be to focus on money. It would be to focus on individuals being empowered, understanding themselves, identifying what they like, what they want to do. You know, once you're doing something that you like, it's not seen as a job, it's not seen as work, it's not hard. I feel like you need to enable somebody to be able to understand what it is that they want to do and what they're good at.
Do you think that young people get this kind of, we're talking younger people naturally now, do you think they get this kind of freedom to blue sky their ideas and decide that, well, this is going to be my passion? Or do you think our young people
I personally
are
don't.
dragooned down certain tracks?
I personally don't think they get that chance. And the reason why I say that, I used to work in the welfare to work sector. I used to help people to, you know, apply for jobs and so forth. But one thing I noticed way back then when I worked in that field is that young people are pushed into jobs. You know, do this because you need to get a job, you need to pay your rent, you need to do something. They're not pushed into what is it you want to do, what is it you have an interest in.
Or what it is they may have the talent for.
Exactly.
Right.
I think if you don't look at what people have a talent for, what they want to do, what they like, you know, what their interests are, then you're not going to keep that person in the job for very long.
Dee, you run AdPack, and one of the things I noticed on your material was a schools to industry pipeline.
Absolutely.
And it stopped me dead in my tracks, because what we hear is a schools to jail pipeline
Absolutely.
for far too many young black men. Tell me about it.
So just to touch on a point, first of all, that Kevin was talking about.
Right.
He's talking about purpose unearthing.
Right.
Your purpose is there, like under a sculptor's rock.
Right.
You just get rid of the spare. We have pockets of where that's happening. And knowing the exceptional organizations that me and my brother Nana from Access UK, who developed the schools to industry pipeline with us, and we work in tandem along the educational structures. So Access UK is a very powerful organization that work in employment training and have very powerful programs coming out now. We think about purpose unearthing, because if you don't realize your purpose, you're floating in jobs that don't mean anything. That means the allure of an illicit income is far more powerful than £8-10 an hour. So the point of the work that we're doing in the schools to industry pipeline was to gather nationally the delivery partners, which we're doing now. Birmingham, Manchester, Leeds.
What kind of delivery partners are you talking about?
So they go across the board. Let's take the construction sector, for instance.
Right.
So my brother Bola, OBE, is the patron of a brand new software developed by another brother of mine, Emmanuel, who worked in the construction industry, who became a first-tier designer. Now, all of the construction industry's roles are being replaced by automated softwares. So what we're doing with another brother of mine, Otis Thomas, in Manchester, where they have a tech hub called Burn, is training on that software so that we become the first in line in the construction industry.
Yeah.
So now what do? As reverse engineers, we go back from university, from college, through schools to nursery, to recognize a clear pathway all the way into that particular role. Now that is just taking one industry. Now imagine when we have 500 delivery partners, 1,000 delivery partners using our brand new CRM tool, where just like Google Docs, delivery partners can edit online and communicate with each other, not on anybody else's platform.
I have to ask you now, Kevin, do you think members of our community lack a sense of mission or purpose in what they're doing? Because listening to what Kevin is saying, Dean is saying, it's almost as if people just fall into a rut and they get carried along by the conveyor belt without thinking about it, and so on and so forth. There's no passion involved in what they're doing. What do you think about that?
I feel there is an element of that happening in our society. For me personally, example, a lot of people say to me, oh, your customer service is amazing. One of the reasons why I deliver the best customer service I can is because I'm tired of receiving bad customer service. So that's the thing for me, you know. So, but going into the way our system, our society is set up at the moment, how it looks to me is, you know, our people, not even just young people, just people in general, they're so busy in terms of trying to pay bills, you know, trying to fit in
They
society.
haven't got time to even look up.
Exactly. So you don't have time to even make a choice in where you want to go. You just have to get the job
Part
that
of
you
the
can
system.
get.
Okay. We ran some polls on Instagram, and our viewers sent in their responses. When it comes to where should we start, 28% of our viewers said jobs. Where did the 72% go, do you think?
Education.
Absolutely spot on. Was that what you would have said?
Yeah, I would have also split that down into self-employment, because a lot of people now are thinking about, you know, starting their own businesses because of, even during this COVID time, a lot of people felt very insecure with when it comes to, you know, their employment.
Absolutely.
So I would have put that in there myself.
Well, here we go. I would really have loved to have continued going through here, but I'll read you two more polls. It says, will social cohesion within society, wider society help us with developing our community? 82% of our viewers said yes, 18% said no. And how do we develop the black community? 71% said economic power and 29% said political power. Well, I'd like to thank you, but we have run out of time for this part of the show. That's the end of part 2. Join us after the break, when I'll be joined by Dana Byfield and Jamal Germain. But from Dean and Kevin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back. You're watching Your Voice with me, Ted Kofi, and my guests for this half are speaker, master networker, and visionary Dana Byfield, and athlete and body double Jamal Jermaine. Jamal, Dana, welcome. Thanks so much for joining us. What do you think is the most important thing we must do to develop our community? Very quickly.
For me personally, I would say we need to teach our young men and women how to channel their energy from off the street to particular sport, something that they're passionate about. That's one aspect.
Superb. Dana?
Yeah, I think, you had a fantastic half of the show and we touched on economics. I think, very important is the role of the business community and education coming together in terms of developing our community moving forward.
Terrific. Thank you. Now, we've the opinions of some of our viewers at home. This is My Voice from Richard Charles and Sade Adeyemi.
So one thing I think that we can do to, or the black community can do to literally to develop itself is, I just think like Bruce Lee said something that, sometimes you got to be like water. Water, it changes its shape, it changes whatever bottle or whatever vessel it goes into, like it molds to that. And like, I just feel like sometimes, we got to leave the hood in the hood. And like, when we come into these places, not to say that, oh, I'm black and I'm proud, so I'm just gonna come with a dashiki and come with a, like we need to adhere to, the place, know where we are, know where we are, and then so we can adapt to whatever situation, whatever circumstances that we're in, and then put our spin on it. But we can't take what's out there and then bring it to somewhere that's in here, because it's not gonna work. It's like obviously in the Bible, like when was it Joseph? He was in the dungeon. When he was gonna go meet Pharaoh, the first thing he did, he shaved his beard. The Israelites, they didn't shave their beards. They grew their beards long, because he knew that he was going into a place where it required him to do so, and because otherwise he wouldn't have been able to get in, and then he wouldn't be able to do what he needed to do. So we need to adapt.
We need to bring a wealth of education to the black community in the area of finance. A lot of people are not aware of how to manage their debts, how to set up emergency funds. They don't even know what sort of insurance policies they're meant to take out to make sure that they leave a good legacy for those that they love. So in my opinion, I think we need to create forums. We need to put the word out there whereby people can understand how they need to manage their finances, how they need to take out the right insurance policies by using an expert like myself, like some of my colleagues, whereby they can get the right information, the right type of policy, and leave a great legacy for their loved ones.
Well, you heard Jamal, Dana, you heard what our two Vox Poppers said just now. One was talking about being appropriate, the other was talking about getting the right appropriate specialist financial advice about their future. Now, Dana, you're a coach.
Yes.
And reference the comment from the gentleman from JP Morgan on the Vox Pop. What do you make about this whole business of being appropriate for the job, for the situation, for where you are?
Yeah, I think it's a very important facet to understand exactly where you are and how you need to behave in that situation. But equally, I feel that sometimes people don't bring their whole self to the situations that they actually find themselves in, and people sense a lack of authenticity before it hits the ground. So it's about having a knowledge of self, a self-esteem of self, and to have that strategic mind and vision to how can I play my best self in this scenario to best serve myself and my agenda.
Being true to yourself, being authentic. You were talking about young people finding something about which they were passionate. How does that relate to what you were saying, Jamal?
I think a lot of it, what Dana was saying is absolutely spot on. However, there's different environments that you're going to find yourself in that you have to adapt to. And with young men and women, you find a lot of them, they haven't been taught how to behave in certain environments. And I think obviously when you have a mentor of that, or that person that could help structure their lifestyle, I think obviously it will take them a lot further. The lady in the video was talking about financial
acumen.
pursuing your financial goals, leaving an inheritance for your family. And I think that's very important. Learning how to invest, learning how to trade, all of these things are very, very, very important. And unfortunately, within the black community, we don't necessarily have people that would actually sit down with us and teach us these things.
Well, there are three main reasons, apparently, that why BAME groups are underrepresented in management positions: a lack of opportunity, discrimination, and the absence of role models to teach them what to do, where, when, and how, while they bring the rest of themselves to the party. So let's look at politics now. I mean, we've talked a little bit about economics in the first part. How far do you think we've gone in the political arena?
Well, I don't think we've gone that far at all, actually. And this might be quite a controversial comment. There have been many strides that have been made in terms of representation. When Diane Abbott came into politics and power, for example, she was one face among many. So we have many more faces, but when we're looking on the ground at the statistics, not much has changed. And bringing in the economic conversation and the importance of that, which our Vox Popper obviously brought up this evening, it's incredibly important to understand the link between money, power, and politics, and how the interplay can either make a community or break a community.
How do you think we make this segue into politics? Because it is said that the black community is actually worth £300 billion. That's not chicken feed, that's not small potatoes. But clearly there's something we're not doing with that money to leverage it into actual political power. What do we need to do to develop that kind of edge, that cutting edge to the wealth which we actually possess already in the UK?
I think we need to create a community where that money can stay in and generate within that community. At the moment, there's I think every pound that goes into the black community, within 15 minutes, it disappears from the community. And we need to go back in the day when we actually had a community where money goes in, and it takes, I actually remember, I literally not too long read it, and it literally just came off my mind, but where it stayed in the community for a certain period of time before it actually left the community. I think we need to find more of our own, where we can actually work together and develop together, and actually, because at the minute, it's like a crab in the barrel. We're all trying to pull each other to get to the top, and I think we all need to just sit down and work together and actually see where we can put our skills together in order to better ourselves as a whole.
What do you make of the politician who said that she'd just been elected to Parliament and she was waiting at the entrance to the House of Commons, and another Tory MP lady walked up and handed her bag to hold because she thought she was one of the orderlies working there, and she was actually an MP. Recently, do you remember the story of the editor of Vogue, Edward Aninful? He was trolled, racially profiled, and asked to take the tradesman's entrance. He was the boss of the building. So what does this say about how far we've come or not come, and what can we do about that?
I mean, we have to be really careful not to internalize these things, I feel, when they happen, because actually this is more reflective of the negative biases that other communities have about us. So therefore, if you see a black face in a scenario, they can't possibly be in a position of leadership. So I think we need to make sure that that is then clear. Now, we mentioned education before, and whenever one says education, we always normally think about primary, tertiary, university education. Our parents, our elders are teaching us how to move through life. And unfortunately, many of the wisdoms that they have obviously gained a long time are positive, but many of those don't hold up and they don't stand up to scrutiny in the new age. So things like teaching people about leadership positions, how to communicate effectively, how to think strategically, how to network, how to actually move and traverse through society, so that even when those unfortunate instances do happen, and they do unfortunately happen very often, the one has a firm sense of self, who they are, and can still move forward. And what I think is that the conversation needs to move away from what we need to do, and the conversation needs to be squarely placed with Eurocentric people about what it is they need to do to clean up their own act, so that these things don't happen anymore.
Is it about us or is it about them, Jamal?
I couldn't agree more, to be honest with you. It's definitely a case where we need to, or they need to stop looking at us and thinking, okay, yeah, black, yeah, he's a criminal, or whatever the case may be. I think they need to come to a realization that, yes, we may not be given the privileges that they've been given. However, we are willing to work hard for the opportunities that we've been given. The opportunities that we've been given. We work hard, and we just want to be treated fairly. That's all we're asking for to be treated fairly and to be given those opportunities, the same opportunities that they've been given.
Everybody else has been given.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jamal, thank you very much. Now that's the end of part 3. Join us after the break when we'll be wrapping up the discussion on how we can develop the black community, right here on Your Voice. Welcome back. You're watching Your Voice with me, Ted Kofi, and my guests, Dana Byfield and Jamal Germain. Dana, Jamal, I'm going to roll on now to what we can actually do to build the kind of strong community that we want. What strategies would you suggest?
Yeah, well, I think talking about economics, because I actually used to run a financial education company, did that for half a decade. So many of the issues that we've been discussing are issues that the general populace has, regardless of communities, but they're amplified because of, unfortunately, where we are at the moment. I think we have to be very, very conscious. If we're looking at economics, most people's spending habits are very unconscious. So for us to start recapturing some of that £300 billion a year, initiatives like the Black Pound Day in individual households and families need to be started. So what do I mean by that? So a conscious effort every week for everybody, but particularly the Black African community, that X amount of pounds every single week I am going to be conscious to spend within my own community. Many of the challenges that we have is that we actually don't have proper community structures. So institutions that we own, we control, and we fund. That's how you start to leverage power. To whom you give your money to is to whom you give away or keep your power. That conscious effort in spending goes into our institutions, goes into our local economy, goes into tax receipts. Therefore, we can hold local authorities and governments to account about how they spend that money. It goes into education, it goes into training, and very importantly, as you were discussing in the first half, it goes into entrepreneurship and job creation so that we can fund our own businesses, economies, communities, and institutions, and have enough capital to do that. So when our brightest and best come up with those ideas and they need funding, the capital
we can provide it for them. What's your key strategy?
Adding to that is try and get young men and women places that they can go and develop some of these skills, invest in, buying shares and all that kind of stuff, and actually pairing them with a role model, a figure that they can actually learn some of these things from, and someone that they can and hold them accountable for their actions. So, for example, I have a lot of people around me that if I don't go to training, I'll get a phone call saying, why are you not at training? What stopped you from going to training today?
So there's a network around you which is actually driving you in the right direction.
Definitely, I think
the whole time.
within the community, we definitely have to have a network where someone or that person can go to and go, okay, this person holds me accountable for everything I do. So that's one thing that we can do, and definitely supporting the local businesses, keeping the money within the community, so our community can continue to develop as we go along. There's that as well, but I think from ground, I think everything is grassroots. So we definitely need to focus on the youths today.
The conversation today has focused very much on youths and economic power. There is obviously a problem with the way our youths are policed at the moment. We are far more likely to be stopped and searched. We are far more likely to fall foul of the criminal justice system. We are far more likely to be incarcerated than white people at every level of comparability to black people. How do we lance that boil? How do we deal with it? Is it our problem or is it a matter of the government's policy, which is a problem? Dana.
We have to understand that the structure in place that we find ourselves in was never created for our empowerment, let alone for our equality. Now, most of us here in this country are here because somebody from another place came to the UK. One of the things that I feel has done our communities holistically a disservice actually is integrating into mainstream. So Jamal spoke earlier about making sure the money circulates in the community. When our forebears first came here, that's exactly what they had to do. The money stayed within the community, so we were able to advance. So we need to be careful sometimes about recreating the wheel. We have a blueprint. We have forebears, grandparents, other individuals who successfully came here with little education necessarily, but a great drive to do better and to come and build up the mother country. So I really think that we need to get back to the grassroots, what actually worked for us as a community, and bring that sense back to a whole.
But what does that mean in terms of stopping young black men being abused by the police, wrongly or rightly? What does that say about finding young black men jobs? Is it a question now of building the black community by making it speak up more? Or is it a question of us going back and mending our own broken fences?
I think definitely with this day and age anyway, everything has been filmed. I think we definitely need to keep filming things as it happens, and we need to talk about it more. And definitely we need to address the government with these issues and highlight them, because there's often, I think the stop rate now is 4-1 in the UK, which is actually ridiculous when you actually look at it. And the more they stop you, the more they antagonize you, you're building low self-esteem. You're literally deterring the person, and you get to a stage where that person then put themselves in a shell. They don't want to open up. They don't want to apply for jobs and go for better opportunities. So they basically, so to say, put in their hand, lowering your self-esteem to put your hand, keep you down, basically. And hence why a lot of our black men and women are not rising, because they're constantly being stopped and being antagonized by officers.
Fine, Jamal. Dana, you're a coach. If you say this in the mainstream, people will say you're either making it up, you've got a chip on your shoulder, you're difficult. You just don't have this conversation in the wider society with people who have the power to influence this situation. Square me that circle. How do we solve that problem?
I think it's a bit of both. So it is a bit of making sure that we continue to film these things, making sure that we're proactive, making sure that we are speaking up, but in purposeful ways where it's actually going to make an impact and where it's going to hurt. So we can't just march, and we can't just, protest, and we can't just film things. I think we need to be at these decision-making tables, and the way that we do that is through leveraging political power, first on a grassroots and local level. So how many of us, for example, are going to the local authority, council meetings? How many of us are holding people that we pay our tax receipts money to and keep employed and in jobs into account? And it's about coming up with a strategic way to do that, coming together as a collective and saying, okay, we're going to actually handle this particular geographic area first, get people into the council who are more aligned to our way of thinking and doing things. That also makes it easier to hold people to account.
Question is, Jamal, who's going to do what she says? Is Dana going to do it? Are you going to do it? Am I going to do it? Is the man behind the camera going to do it? Who is going to take the lead?
I think it starts with all of us. I think we all have a part to play in it. We all have our domain or something that we are passionate about, or that area that we can focus on. For me, it can be sports, that I take hold of the sporting environment, speak to the leaders in the sporting environment. For you, it could be like the filming industry or wherever it is. For Dana, for everyone, it can be whatever environment they're in. They need to focus on those environments and try and make change with those environments.
Let me speak for the audience. Let's say I work within a particular sector, finance, sports, arts, whatever, and I want to speak up. But the atmosphere that's created is so comfortable, so uncomfortable rather, that it's difficult to raise my voice. What do you do when you're in that kind of situation?
Yeah.
Because this, everyone in our community will have encountered.
Well, essentially, you have to make a choice. Are you going to put up, and are you going to speak out, or are you going to shut up? Everybody that is within their particular respective professions knows that there are bodies, there are, as in, regulatory bodies, for example. There are key persons of influence within those industries and within those networks. And it really has to come down to, are you willing to make a personal sacrifice to help the greater good? And I feel the more of us that step up, that speak out, that come forward and are proactive, like Jamal said, in their respective spaces. So I'm very active within the business community because that's the space that I inhabit, and showing other people how to use their voice proactively, not just make money through their business and services.
Fantastic. Jamal, self-advocacy. What's your message on how to speak up? Because it will likely be uncomfortable.
It will always, it's a very uncomfortable conversation to have with whoever you're having it with, regardless if it's family or outside of family. but I think it's very important that you document these things as they're happening, and speak to leaders outside of our farm. There's a lot of committees outside of work or within work that you can speak to, that will voice these opinions that you have, and I think that's very important that you do so.
That's excellent. Jamal, Dana, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, that's all we have time for on this edition of Your Voice. Thank you to my guests in this part, Dana Byfield and Jamal Germain, and of course to my earlier guests, Kevin Stewart and Dean Okine. And thank you for watching. I'm Ted Kofi. Please join us again next time here on Your Voice.
It seems extraordinary that there's nothing that the coronavirus doesn't touch.
All seen Black Lives Matter demonstrations.
Oppression is brought out.
So unfortunately, because I just feel like we're going down this road, we've been down this road before.
We've had